Hey everybody, so today we're going to be attempting to repair a coolant leak on a 2006 Chevy Aveo with the 1.6 liter engine. The reason I'm making this video is because there's not a whole lot of information on the internet or on YouTube about these cars. Especially every time I've looked up trying to make repairs, there's virtually nothing out there. So I've actually got a couple of repairs that I've done on this car on my channel already. But basically what is leaking on this car is there's a pipe running behind the motor. It's called a coolant pipe, and you can't buy it from O'Reilly's or AutoZone or Advance. It's a dealer item. You can buy it online, which is where I bought mine at. The dealer wants about $100 for it. I bought mine from GM Parts online for like $53 plus shipping, which ended up being about $60 total. But what it is, that pipe is right back behind the motor, and it's very hard to get to. It's very hard to see, and you can't even see it hardly from where the camera angle is. But basically what it does is it runs from the bottom radiator hose, which is right here. The bottom radiator hose comes around, there's your clamp, and it clamps onto that pipe, which is right here. Pipe is about maybe a foot long, and it connects to 5 different points: lower radiator hose, water pump, both heater hoses, and the hose that comes from your coolant recovery jug right there. So it's very critical to the coolant system. What happened on this one, it's plastic, and it has a nipple, has 2 nipples actually, that connect to the heater core. This is one of the hoses coming from the heater core, and what I did to try to get it to the shop is I took a pipe nipple and a cap, and I clamped it onto this hose, which isolated the heater core on one side. And then, don't know if you can see it here, but this white stuff here, where my finger is actually 2-part epoxy putty. And I took that and I crammed it in the hole and actually wrapped it all the way around the pipe, and it's holding, which is surprising, but it's holding. And I took it to the shop to try to get them to repair it. Car sat there 4 days. They didn't even look at it. And during that time, I called 4 other shops to try to get an estimate on trying to get this pipe replaced, and nobody could give me a price on it. It was not in the labor estimating guide. They couldn't tell me whether the intake had to come off, whether they could get to it from underneath. I couldn't find anything online as far as any information on how to repair it, how to replace it. So that's why I'm making this video. Last weekend when I was working on it, of course I didn't have a pipe because it was on a Sunday, and I had to order it from online. But I was trying to get the car where at least I could make sure there were no other leaks. I took the air cleaner box off, thinking maybe I could get to it from this side of the motor. Can't do it. The alternator's in the way at the bottom. As you can see, there's no way to get to it on this side. It's way too tight. So what I did, I went underneath, and it appears that if I take the starter off, and there's a trapezoidal shaped bracket that is on the other side of the opposite of the starter, it looks like that needs to come off. And I believe, hopefully, I can get to that pipe once I take the starter and that bracket off. But car is very low to the ground. Car is very low to the ground. And a standard set of ramps just does not get you high enough, because you've got to get under the car and get your hands pretty far up into the motor. So what I've done here is I've taken my ramps and I've put these on the back wheels of the car. And then what I'm going to do next is I'm going to get my jack stands, and I've got a pretty sandy yard. So I'm going to get my jack stands, I'm going to get my jack, and I'm going to put some plywood underneath my jack stands to make sure they're stable. I'm going to jack the car up as high as I can with my jack and get the jack stands up as high as I can, and then I'm going to put some wood cribbing on the side to where, just in case something fails with the jack stands or whatever, I just want to make sure I'm covered there. So the back's already up off the ground. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to jack it up, put some jack stands up underneath it with some plywood underneath those, and then we'll go from there. Okay, so here's an update on what I've done so far. I decided not to use the jack stands after all. So, like I said before, what I did is I took the car, I backed it up on the existing ramps that I already had, and that way it would give me extra clearance in the back. It wouldn't just be high in the front and sloping to the back. It would actually give me more clearance in the back as well. And then what I done was I had some leftover 2x10s, and I took those and I cut them into 18-inch long pieces, and I jacked the car up one side at a time and put these under there. These cars does not have a very good place to jack, so what I done is I went up under here and I found this bolt here where it connects to the back of the subframe, and I put my jack up under there, and I jacked up as far as I could. I put 3 of those underneath. I let it down, I went to the other side, and then what I did was I took my jack and I put 3 of these cut 2x6s on there, and I ran it underneath the bottom right here to the control arm, and I put it right in the middle of that control arm as close as I could to the wheel, and jacked it up the rest of the way. And as you can see, I've got a pretty good amount of room underneath here. I think I've actually got enough room I can even put my creeper, well, maybe not quite that much room, but I've got a pretty good bit of room that I can slide my plywood up under there and hopefully work with enough space, and also be able to work safely underneath here. Like I said, a lot of sand in my yard. I just didn't trust jack stands. I really wanted to have tires on the ground. So everything looks good. I checked here and made sure that my tires are not bowing in on the front. And what I mean by that is I want to make sure that when I jacked it up, I slid those boards over to make sure that the wood was not leaning inward or outward. It's pretty straight up and down. So now the next thing is to get up underneath the car and see if we can locate the pipe and start taking the components off to get to it. What I also want to mention, guys, I'm real big on safety. I don't want to have the car fall on me. I don't like working under cars. Never have, probably never will. And I don't have a lift here at home, so also want to point out what I did was I went up to the car and I shook it. I just grabbed it from side to side and I shook it and made sure that everything was solid before I got up under it. Just a big tip. I want you guys to be safe, make sure that the car didn't fall on you. So just went up to it and shook it, made sure it was solid, and it was. So now to get underneath it. So here we are underneath the car, and as you can see, there's still not a whole lot of room, and I really can't show you the pipe because there's so much stuff in the way. But on the left here, right there, is the starter, and right here on the right is this bracket. Both of those have got to come off. There is some electrical connections up there. There's some bolts, and first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna disconnect the positive battery terminal to where the starter won't have any power. And then I'm not going to be able to show you guys how to take the starter off because I just don't have a free hand to hold the camera. So I'm going to take the starter off. I know that there's some bolts I got to get to from underneath, and I think there's a bolt that I've got to get to from the top, but I will show you guys that once it's over with. But right now that's my plan, is take the starter off first, disconnect the battery cable first to make sure there's no power, make sure nothing's going to arc out. Then I'm going to take those 2 wires loose from the solenoid, which is pictured up top, which is right here. And then I'm going to take the bolts loose from the starter, which is below it, and drop that out through the bottom. Then I'm going to go over here and take these connections loose and these bolts loose from this bracket and drop this down, and hopefully I can show you the pipe.